Welcome to History Decoded, the early Middle Ages, 500 to 1000 AD. Our story begins in the early Middle Ages, a period often referred to as the Dark Ages. Why the darkness, you ask? Well, the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD left Europe in a state of political fragmentation and chaos. Without the unifying presence of Rome, Europe splintered into various kingdoms and territories. From the Visigoths in Spain to the Franks in Gaul, each group tried to establish its rule in a land where law and order were scarce. Yet, it wasn't entirely bleak. Amidst the chaos, the Christian Church emerged as a powerful institution, providing not just spiritual guidance, but also social stability. Monasteries dotted the landscape, becoming centers of learning, agriculture, and cultural preservation. Monks worked tirelessly, copying ancient texts by hand, ensuring that knowledge from Greek and Roman scholars wasn't lost forever. At the same time, Europe was under constant threat of invasion. The Vikings, infamous for their raids, came from the north, while the Moors advanced from the south and the Magyars from the east. These invasions created a climate of fear, but also accelerated the development of fortified settlements, castles. Castles weren't just luxurious homes, they were military fortresses, designed to withstand prolonged sieges and protect entire communities. Meanwhile, the feudal system took root, forming a structured but rigid society where kings granted land to nobles in exchange for loyalty, while serfs worked the land for protection. Knights became symbols of chivalry, honor, and warfare, bound by a strict code that shaped medieval culture for centuries. The High Middle Ages, 1000 to 1300 AD. Now, let's move into the High Middle Ages, roughly spanning 1000 to 1300 AD. By this time, Europe was experiencing a remarkable transformation. Population growth surged, new agricultural techniques boosted food production, and towns began to flourish. This was also the time of Gothic architecture, with towering cathedrals reaching for the heavens. These cathedrals weren't just religious symbols, they represented the might and wealth of the church. One of the most defining features of this era was the Crusades. Beginning in 1096, the Crusades were religious wars launched by European Christians to reclaim the Holy Land from Muslim rule. But they weren't just about religion. The Crusades were a turning point in European history, spurring trade with the East and exposing Europeans to new ideas, spices, and luxury goods. Returning Crusaders brought back not only stories of adventure, but also innovations like advanced military techniques, more effective fortifications, and even the first glimpses of Arabic numerals. The High Middle Ages also saw the rise of universities. Institutions like the University of Bologna, Oxford, and Paris became centers of intellectual life. Students flocked to these universities to study theology, law, medicine, and the newly revived works of Aristotle. It was a time of intellectual revival, a precursor to the more famous Renaissance that was still a few centuries away. But it wasn't just knights and scholars shaping the era. Merchants and craftsmen, organized into guilds, began to influence urban life. Cities like Venice and Florence became bustling trade hubs, facilitating the exchange of goods and ideas across Europe, Asia, and Africa. The Late Middle Ages, 1300 to 1500 AD. As we enter the Late Middle Ages, the period from 1300 to 1500, Europe faced both great achievements and severe crises. The Hundred Years' War between England and France broke out in 1337, lasting well beyond a century and deeply impacting both nations. This conflict saw the rise of national identities, with figures like Joan of Arc emerging as symbols of resistance and hope. Joan's story, from a simple peasant girl to a warrior and eventual martyr, epitomizes the extraordinary shifts of the era. Yet while some regions were locked in war, others were flourishing culturally. The Italian city-states, like Florence, were experiencing an early wave of the Renaissance, marked by new artistic expressions, humanist philosophy, and scientific discoveries. But even amidst this cultural flowering, Europe faced a deadly foe, the Black Death. The Black Death, or bubonic plague, struck Europe in 1347 and wiped out roughly one-third of the population within just a few years. This catastrophic event changed European society in ways no war ever could. It led to labor shortages, shifts in economic power, and even a questioning of the Church's authority, as people sought explanations for the disease's relentless spread. Interestingly, the massive population decline also had unexpected positive effects. With fewer people to feed, resources became more available, wages rose, and many serfs gained more freedom as the rigid feudal system began to break down. This period was also marked by peasant revolts, as common people demanded more rights and better working conditions. The late Middle Ages were thus a mix of innovation, conflict, and social transformation. It was a time when Europe began to lay the foundation for modern nation-states. The era saw the growth of stronger, centralized monarchies, as seen in England, France, and Spain, and a gradual shift towards a more money-based economy rather than the traditional barter system.